Welcome to,
Being recorded.
thanks, meeting's being recorded. Thank you, Maria. So welcome to the Environmental Justice Coalition meeting. Say number, I can't even read the slides. Is it number 6, number 8? Number 8, okay, here we are. It's great to see folks. We've got an exciting time together. If we can go to the next slide, I'll move through just an acknowledgement that this work's been generously funded by the Climate Commitment Act. So we appreciate the resources that help us move and advance this work forward. Before we get into introductions, we go to the next slide. Well, actually, we will move into introductions. So I'll just say we have the staff and consultant team, and as folks, these are the people surrounding you with supports and helping to move some of the project work forward. As folks present today, I'll ask them to reintroduce themselves as we go through our agenda. As a reminder, I'm Ben Duncan with Kearns and West. My colleagues Nicole and Maria are here. Maria, thank you for putting in the chat. For Zoom issues, you can email Maria if you want to post in the chat any technical issues that you might have today. That'll be helpful. So why don't we do a round of introductions, and I'll move us through just a couple more logistics, and we'll get going. I'm going to just start with our EJC folks. Tanya?
Hi, everyone. I'm Danya Otto. I'm on the EJC team, and I'm the ED for Sakura 39ers Youth Association.
Well, welcome. Rebecca?
Hi, everybody. I'm the Executive Director of the Free Clinic of Southwest Washington. It's good to see you all today.
Great, thank you. Abby?
Hi, everyone. I'm Abby Hollopeter. I'm the EJC alternate for Odyssey World. Thanks for having me today.
All right, thank you. Jude? No, there, Jude? We'll come back to Jude. Anna?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ana Karen Betancourt Macias, she, her, ella. I am part of the EJC, and I am here with Latino Leadership Northwest.
Great, thank you. Jude, I see you popped on camera. You heard the call.
A few clicks away. Thank you for having us. I'm with the Farm and Food Justice Network. I'm an alternate with a farmer, and good to see everyone.
Thank you, Jude. Sunny?
Hello, Sunny Wonder. I am with Council for the Homeless and newly stepping into the role with the EJC.
Well, welcome. It's great to have you. Thanks for joining. Where am I? Move around, Angela.
Hi, my name is Angela William. I'm with the Pacific Islander Community Association of Washington, and I'm back with the EJC.
Right, thank you. So I saw Tavi, but Gabriella, let's come to you. Oh, Tavi, there you are. You went on camera. I was looking for you on the phone, and then Gabriella will come to you next.
Hi, Tavi Kale here with iUrban Teen, part of the EJC, program coordinator of iUrban Teen, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Gabriella.
Hi, everyone. This is Gabriela Mendoza Ewing with Hispanic Disability Support of Southwest Washington, Pasitos Gigantes, and I am an EJC and CAG member. And I'm on my way to be in person, so I'll be switching off soon a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Alejandra?
Hello, Almendra Velasquez with Fourth Pay Forward, part of EJC, and thank you for having me.
Right, and then Alana.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alana Tadella from the Pacific Islander Health Board of Washington. Sorry, you're going to hear background noise. Just picked up kids from school.
Great, thank you. Then, Josh.
Josh Jones, Program Director at Partners in Careers.
Great, thank you. Did we get everybody, all the EJC members?
Lycus.
Oh, Leica just joined. Leica. Want to introduce yourself? Leica, you there? Okay. Might be a couple clicks. We'll keep an eye out for you for when you can join. Did I miss anybody? EJC members? Okay, well, let's keep going then. Pull slides back up. I think we'll do project updates and then we'll kind of move into, well, actually, Min, you just joined. Do you want to say hello?
Hello.
Do you want to introduce yourself too?
Yes. My name is Min Pham. I'm the joined for the Vietnamese community of Clark County.
Great, thank you. Good to see you. So Jenna, do you want to do some project updates?
Yeah, sure. And we're unmuted, right, Amy? You can hear me, right, Ben?
We can hear you.
Okay, awesome. All right, so I've just got a few updates for today. And hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. So just a few notes about your meeting materials. In there, you will see comments from your fellow EJC members, as well as members of the public that we have received since we last met way back in the beginning of August, which seems like a really long time ago. So those are in your meeting packet. They're there if you want to look at them for reference. A few other items coming up on October 19th. The county is going to be hosting a community workshop on greenhouse gas reduction. This is part of our community engagement work that we're doing with the general public, so anyone is invited to come. It will be at Sarah J. Anderson Elementary School from 9 to 11 a.m. And the details for that event are on the county's climate project webpage. We are requesting registration to help us just with logistics. So that is requested by 5 p.m. on October 15th. Spanish interpretation is also available by request when you register. So that's coming up, not this weekend, but the following weekend. And then for those of you who may be interested in the broader comprehensive planning process that the county is doing, there is an upcoming work session on that with the county council this Wednesday, October 9th at 9 a.m. That will be a work session on the comprehensive plan land use alternatives. So that's a sort of key point in the comprehensive planning process. It is a work session, so that means it's really a meeting designed to brief the council on the topic, but members of the public are welcome to listen in, and then hearings on the topic with the Planning Commission and County Council will be scheduled after. So if you did want to make comments on possible land use alternatives for the county, it can be helpful to listen to the work session to prepare for what you want to say at the hearings that will be scheduled in the coming weeks, exact dates to be determined. Okay, those are the only announcements I have.
All right, thanks, John. Any questions? Okay, well, not seeing any, I'll start teeing up our conversation for today. So you can go to the slide. Yeah, we've got two big topics to move through as a group. So the first, and this will be a kind of key moment to kind of make real the work that you all have been doing. And that's maybe one way to think about this, right? Is as you all were formed and you've been off and working with and connecting and bringing perspective from the communities that you all work with and are a part of, really understanding not just a chance to, or creating some space, not just to reflect back on what we've already learned, but to apply what you all have learned, the conversations, the priorities, the perspectives, to the relationship of the work that you've been doing and our second topic of today, which is the greenhouse gas reduction policies. And so as we go through our conversation today, one will be reflecting back, and Jenna will be summarizing some of what they've heard and offering you all a chance to help fill in the blanks, give more life to that engagement. And then really, as we go through this initial look at draft greenhouse gas reduction policies, we're going to ask you to really think about how those policy concepts apply, align with, correspond, or don't with what you've heard from community. And I'll just let you know from the outset, so you all are prepared when the moment comes. What we're hoping is that you'll actually spend some time thinking about what you're seeing in the draft policies, what you've heard from community, and then doing a roundtable conversation. So I really just do want to offer each of you an opportunity to be able to reflect back. This is what we're seeing that really aligns. This is where some of the gaps are, or ideas that seem to be missing. So just as a mechanism for how we're going to spend our time together, it's both by topic and with that process. And in order to kind of move through that, if we go to the next slide, we will create some space for, as we always do, for EJC announcements. So this is, again, just going back to some of our early process, making sure you all as a coalition are able to inform each other, be able to leverage the work you're doing to coordinate where it makes sense, but also just to make sure that folks are aware of the exciting opportunities that exist in community. We will build in a break after we have that reflection on engagement that I mentioned earlier, that Jenna will provide and you all will supplement, and then we'll spend a good chunk of our agenda, as I described, working through the reduction goals and policies, and really doing a crosswalk between what you all have heard and what you'll be looking at today. As always, we'll create some space for public comment. So if anyone in the audience is interested in providing public comment, we will offer that space at the end of our meeting, and we'll do an announcement at that time. And then we will wrap up and get you out of here by 6:30. And then thank you, Maria. For those of you who are accessing chat, you can also submit written comments or submit a comment online with the website that's posted in the chat. If we go to the next slide, just again, some housekeeping reminders. Our Environmental Justice Coalition members have joined as panelists and members of the public as attendees. That means as we have our conversation today, only the Environmental Justice Coalition EJC members will be participating in the discussion. For those of you who are as attendees, again, we will open up public comment at the later part of our agenda. As a best practice, we'll ask that you folks stay on mute. Use your video as much as you can. Obviously, we like to create the feeling of being together in a room, even in this virtual space. And we understand, of course, you have other things going on and bandwidth and all the stuff that prevents you, but we do encourage you to be on camera as much as you can. You all have done a great job raising your hand, getting in the queue, taking turns, having conversations. So I'll ask you to just keep doing that. Obviously, as your facilitator, I can, if you're on camera, I can sometimes see when you want to talk. Obviously, if you come off mute, I'll also take that as an indication that you like to contribute to the conversation. If you are on the phone or end up on the phone at any point, you can use the raise hand button with *9 and then *6 to unmute. As Maria put in the chat earlier, any technical issues that you have as we go through this meeting, you can email Maria Verano, colleague at Kearns and West, at mverano@kearnsandwest.com. And then as folks have already mostly done, updating name, affiliation, pronouns if you'd like to share as part of Zoom. And then, take care of yourself. We're here for 3 hours. So, you know me, I like to get some Cheez-Its in the middle of this conversation, glass of water. Let's make sure you stay comfortable and engaged as we go through the conversation. I'll go to the next slide, just a couple additional tips. I think folks hopefully know where the raise hand button is, but on the bottom of your Zoom screen, at any point, you can click the raise hand, click on that and get into the queue. We also have made closed captions available. There should be a show captions or CC button on the bottom of your Zoom screen as well, if that's helpful for your accessibility and participation. So you go to the next slide. I feel like, again, we've done a really wonderful job as a group, so I won't belabor this point. Share space. We're going to do a roundtable today, so I do hope that folks are ready and prepared to offer some insights. We do encourage you as things come up to bring them into the room and bring them in early. Help us, name the things that are important. We ask that you stay on and focus on the substance and the issues that we have in front of us for today. That's largely around engagement, relationships, and the greenhouse gas reduction policies. And then listening and working to understand each other's perspective. And again, I'm going through these, but you all have done an incredible job of really being mindful of each other and very respectful. And then for chat, just, not using chat as a virtual side conversation. It can be incredibly distracting. So we'll just encourage folks, bring your voice into the room. Chat always has some value depending on, how it's used, but I'll just ask that folks are not having side conversations through that mechanism. So with that, I'm going to ask us, if we go to the next slide, if we remember from our last meeting, you have a meeting summary that went out in the packet. If folks, I guess I'll just open it up if there was any corrections, concerns, or any flags from our last meeting summary. Okay, not seeing any concerns. I'll consider our meeting summary from our last meeting approved to move forward. Okay, thank you all. So our next slide says project updates. So this might be project updates number 2, Jenna, or did you already do this?
Oh, I think we maybe had an extra slide in there. I think we did them early by accident. So no more project updates. You go to the next.
We're just every 5th slide, we're just going to add a project update just in case. All right, thank you. I thought that might have been a slide error. So we do create this space at every one of our agendas for EJC members. If there's announcements you'd like to share with your partners around the table, so I'll just open up the space if folks have any announcements they'd like to bring into the room. Yep, Alana.
Hi, good afternoon / good evening, everyone. So in collaboration with Pika Southwest, we will be having our Spooktober wellness event on October 26th at the Pika Southwest office from 12 to 4. But we also have our focus group discussion from 10 to 11. Sorry, Angela, you can back me up on that. So we're really excited. We're finally getting everything settled to finish off our engagement, and we will be doing phase 2 and 3 surveys. We'll be distributing that out to our communities, and then we will have some resources available on hand. I will share our flyer with you all, and everybody is welcome to come. And then I did close off phase 2 and phase 3 engagement online surveys for the Pacific Islander Health Board. So those are my updates.
Great, thank you, Alana. Other updates for EJC? Yeah, Abby.
Okay, let's see. This isn't EJC related, but Odyssey World is working with Swatch to do a community engagement event to talk about social and environmental disparities that that community members have experienced. That will be on Tuesday, October 15th at the Swatch office or on Zoom. I can share a flyer with Jenna to share out if folks are interested, but it'll be another good event to talk about similar topics.
Great, thank you. Abby. And Gabriella is in the room. I see. Good. Glad you got there safe. Any other announcements for EJC members? Okay.
Hi, this is Jude.
Yep, Jude, jump in.
Yeah, so a few things. I've been trying to follow along with where we as EJC fit into this greater climate growth management planning update process. So I've been following some of those threads with Planning Commission, and obviously the council is meeting, probably with a similar kind of presentation from staff, I'm assuming. But there's that tier. So we're intersecting into the CAG. I went to a CAG meeting and was a little bit struck by that meeting for various reasons. And like the question of where does EJC come in and where do those equity priorities come in? And so I feel like we're a little, in a sense, subservient to a lot of processes that are going on. And that makes me feel like each of us, and not as a collective, obviously, because we're not, except for what we do here, might consider separate comments and input as a public. Like, I don't know where the public comes in, intersecting with all of that, but I think that as farmers and farm and food supporters, that it's important to get a lot of issues on the table, a lot of policy proposals that don't seem to be in the other mix for one thing. So that's a little bit of a reflection in terms of an update. And I don't know whether this goes here or in the project updates, but maybe I've spoken enough for now and I'll just leave the rest for project update.
Okay. Thanks, Jude. So a couple things just as a quick reflection. So one, of course, you both operate in this space and of course have the opportunity, and we've shared the link for to submit comments to the plan, to your point, Jude, and there's certainly you all have that opportunity. We are going to walk through a bit of some of the process around how engagement is kind of feeding in and can feed in the way that you all's role over the next number of months will continue to kind of shape and influence the process. And then it is, one of the hopes for today, as you look at kind of largely the work of the CAG, and I think, Tracy and team could speak to the way that EJC previous engagement has not shaped kind of what's there. You all have a real ask today to say what's missing. So I think to some of your point, Jude, when you look at some of the policies as they're drafted, that's an explicit ask of today. What's missing, what's aligned with what you're hearing, and what's not aligned. Like you all, are having conversations in community, and I think this is a really important touch point for this body to be able to say, I'm seeing this, and this, but what my community cares about doesn't seem to be captured here. So I think that's part of the essence of what we're asking folks to think through today, but appreciate all the points you made. Any other announcements? Yeah, Anna?
This is more so a thank you to the county team for coming to our annual conference. This year, we hosted 670 students, and our theme was all about environmental justice. So I want to thank y'all for coming through and making a difference. So thank you.
I won't speak for the team, but I'll say thank you all for doing that kind of organizing. That's a lot of students to have in a conference space. So congratulations on that. Other EJC announcements before we keep moving? Okay. Well, let's keep going. Well, I appreciate, we'll always create this space in our agenda. Appreciate folks sharing as you do and continuing to do the inspiring work with community that you all exhibit in your work all the time. So I'm going to move us forward. And Jenna, I'm going to pass it to you. We're going to move through some reflection on engagement and then really identify anything that you would want to add as we end the conversation. But Jenna, I'll pass it to you.
All right. Hi again, everyone. So if we can go to the next slide. Wanted to do a little bit of review with you all and then make sure we also have time to reflect particularly on some sort of initial findings from the phase 2 engagement process, but I want to do some reminders around process, looking back at what we've done so far and where we're at and what's to come. So you all have seen this slide before. It's sort of the high level overview of the decision-making process for this project. And we are approaching a really key point for the EJC at your November and December meetings, where you'll be reviewing draft policy ideas with the equity lens, and we're hoping to use a lot of the feedback that you have heard through your engagement to help us use that equity lens. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so that was like really high level. I also wanted to dig a little bit deeper and look at, again, what's been accomplished so far, what's to come, and how does this engagement work and this equity, how does this actually all fitting together? So if we can think back to the beginning of the project back in February, we did a bunch of introductory project things to get going. We had some discussions on planning for engagement, and you all developed work plans for your communities. And you also helped the county develop an equity lens through the course of a few meetings. And then also near the beginning of the project, we did a little bit of exploration on climate impacts. You might remember many colorful maps during one meeting where Dana was sharing climate projections with everybody. And then we also looked at examples of impacts from various hazards in the county, and you all provided some feedback on that. And also back in the spring, you all started on your phase 1 engagement, collecting feedback from community members regarding their experiences with severe weather impacts. And we're gonna have a star next to that because we're gonna just revisit that briefly today. And then after we looked at, started talking about severe weather impact and you all were on your way with that first round of engagement, we also started talking about possible goals and policy themes for resilience and how to address those severe weather impacts. And you all started with your phase 2 engagement as well, on getting feedback on possible resilience goal ideas. And we'll look at that a little bit closer in a moment as well. And then in July, you all got a chance to review the county's first ever greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And that was a springboard to starting engagement work for phase 3 and phase 4 on greenhouse gas priorities and possible action ideas, which is underway. We also have a very rough first draft greenhouse gas goal and policy list, which we'll be talking more about during the second half of this meeting. So we'll start by that as well. So that's mostly what we've done and a little bit that we're working on right now. Let's go to the next slide. But there's still a lot to come, and I apologize for all of the text on this slide, but I will walk through it. So at your November and December meetings, you all will be helping us review draft policy lists through the equity lens and providing recommendations based on that process. So to do that work, the project team will be providing some supporting information. We will have the summaries that we've been drafting from all of your engagement work. We will have demographic and climate hazard maps on hand to consult as needed. And then our technical consultant teams will have done an initial really sort of high-level analysis on the draft policy list on across multiple criteria. So that'll be additional sort of background information to consider as we use the equity lens. Also, towards the end of the year, we'll have some other folks reviewing these draft policy lists. So we have our partner agency team, which is other staff at the county and at other local, state, and regional agencies who'll be looking at like the feasibility and who has authority to do things related to the policies. Those of us on the project team will also be reviewing the policies in more detail in relationship to other parts of the comprehensive plan, and also reviewing all of the feedback we've heard from the public and looking for gaps or where things aren't aligning. And our technical consultants will be doing a more detailed analysis on priority policies and starting to look at options for setting 5-year targets for things like greenhouse gas emission reductions. So a lot is happening over the next few months of the year. And that will bring us into 2025. When we get there, you all will have 2 meetings left, which will be focused on reviewing, refining, and confirming your recommendations from that those equity lens discussions and what you want to recommend for the policies that are being recommended to the Planning Commission and County Council. So that'll be the focus of those 2 final meetings. We'll also reserve some time to debrief this process and close out anything outstanding. We also want to provide the option that if you all want to write a letter in your own words to accompany your recommendations, that you can do that. That would be something where staff could meet with a couple of folks, like a subcommittee in between meetings, and then bring that back to the full group for review and approval, if that's something you want to do. So it's something like an official document that goes with your recommendations through the process. And then after the EJC's February meeting, you all will be done with what you were charged to do. So you will have completed all of your engagement work. So those contracts will end, and you will have helped the county develop and apply an equity lens to policy options. So at that time, after your all February meeting, you have no further official obligations with the county, but if you did want to stay involved and see this project through the end, you are welcome to participate in the adoption process, which is the final phase of the process as it works its way through the Planning Commission and County Council to get voted on ultimately by the County Council. So if you wanted to participate in that final phase of the process, you would be participating as a member of the public and can advocate for what you want to advocate for. You can coordinate amongst yourselves if you want to, but county staff, we have to step out of the role of helping coordinate you all. But we can help make sure key points that you can ask us questions about the process and when to speak up and things like that. But we have to step out of the coordinating role, and we can't coach you on what to say or not to say in front of the elected officials, that kind of thing. So when we do get to that phase, if you do want to stay involved, I'll just walk through what happens during the last, it'll be about the last 6 months of 2025. So the Planning Commission, this is the county's, it's the formal advisory body to the County Council on amendments or changes to the comprehensive plan. And the County Council is the decision-making body, so they can approve, not approve, or amend recommendations that go before them. So once we have a proposed policy list, community planning staff will brief the Planning Commission and County Council So we'll walk them through this new climate chapter and the policies in it so they know what's in it. And then once they're briefed, they will hold a hearing where any member of the public can provide testimony verbally or submit written comments. So that is a really key point to speak up if you want to be participating in this final part of the process. After the hearing, the Planning Commission discusses what they've heard and they make a recommendation to the County Council. And then at that point, the County Council will deliberate and vote on their final decision. And that decision is what, it gets documented in an ordinance and becomes the official document that makes the proposal go into effect. Okay, so that was a lot of information, so I apologize for that taking a bit of time, but wanted to provide a little bit more context on where your work is fitting into the larger picture. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so let's step back out and just think about the engagement work that you all have been doing amazing work on. So as you recall, we've outlined sort of 4 key phases of engagement in our framework for this project. We are done phase 1, so thank you all for that. Phase 2 and phase 3, most of you are done, but I think there's a few more activities going on related to that. So we are looking forward to you all wrapping that work up and sharing the feedback that you collect with us so we can close out those phases. And then the 4th phase, our ask is that anyone who has phase 4 engagement activities, that you wrap those up before the EJC's December meeting. So basically you'd be done finishing up in November. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Well, hey, Jenna, before you keep going, Jude had a question in the chat. Is it one adoption for kind of everything, or is the climate element separately adopted from the growth management plan? Like, what's the landscape of what?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, so the climate chapter is going to be one of, I think it's 15 chapters in the county's comprehensive plan. And the adoption process is for the entire comp plan, so all 15 chapters and including all the land use alternatives. So this is one piece in a very big project. And that is one of the reasons why it's going to take us about 6 months to get through briefing the Planning Commission and Council and then voting on it, because we just have to do things in chunks and for all those pieces. So it's one thing. Okay, thank you for that question. Okay, so then let's go to the next slide. All right, so I wanted to just, again, thank you all for getting us all of your feedback that you collected, all your deliverables for your phase 1 engagement work on severe weather impacts. Just wanted to do a quick recap now that we, I think last time we talked, we had most of the feedback, but not quite all of it. So wanted to just give the final recap. So with all of your work plus the engagement work that county staff did, you all collected feedback from more than 550 community members. And amongst everybody, that was through 35 different engagement activities. So that is a lot of people and that is a lot of work. So thank you. When we look at the responses and the demographic data that we were able to collect through a lot of those activities, we did hear from people in every single zip code in the county, across many races and ethnicities, genders and housing situations. And just for some context, for other projects I've worked on, if just the county does public engagement and we hold an open house or send out a survey to get feedback, most of the time we hear from mostly white people who are homeowners. And for this feedback, if we look at the demographics, we heard from, I think it was somewhere in the 30 to 40% of people who rent homes and aren't homeowners, a much broader range of race and ethnicities than we usually hear from. And I think it was about a third of the people who provided feedback identified that they spoke a language other than English frequently. So a much, much more diverse group of people provided feedback to us. than we typically hear from. And that is all because of all of you and all of your work. So thank you so much for helping with that. The full final report on this phase 1 engagement, it was in your meeting materials, and it's also on the county webpage. And then there's a very large appendix that has all of this data. If you want to see the tables and the charts with like the demographic data, we can help you find it within that large document as well. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, and this is just a snapshot. We get to see some of the amazing work you all are doing, but you all don't get to see necessarily what each other's doing. These are just from a handful of your projects or phase 1 engagement, just a snapshot of how you were communicating about it. We've got Anna out doing engagement work at a table. So just wanted to share with you all just a quick snippet of, which is only a small piece of everything that you all did for the phase 1 work. So thank you. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, and then finally, to just wrap up our phase 1 engagement, if you all remember at our August meeting, we walked through key themes for what we were seeing in the feedback that was collected, and you all helped highlight, things that seemed to maybe either were missing or needed to be emphasized a little bit more in the summary of that feedback. And then we also got the final batch of feedback from you all who are wrapping things up. So I just wanted to highlight things in that summary from phase 1 engagement that were updated since we last met. So in terms of severe weather impacts, we either added or emphasized further that some day-to-day concerns are much higher priority for some community members than things like climate impacts. When looking at the issues people had the most experience with impacts and issues with, previously smoky air was kind of at the top of the list, but once we got the final batch of feedback, the really hot and really cold weather pretty much rose up in the ranks as well. So it seems like the top 3 hazards that have caused the most issues to community members are the hot weather, the cold weather, and smoky air. So that was interesting to see that shift in once we had all the data. We also added language when describing the financial impacts across many hazards, emphasizing there was particular concern around ability to work and loss of income and the compounding financial impacts. We also added language regarding limited transportation options during severe weather, particularly impactful to young children and people with mobility challenges. We added some language to describe the underlying economic and social systems that create different risk and trauma for different people that are then exacerbated by climate impacts. And we also added more emphasis in the language on concerns around mental health impacts, particularly the compounding impacts and particularly also for youth. And then also ended up adding more items to the summary on what people identified that they needed with severe weather. So such as change the language around funding assistance to access resources to emphasize that more. Some new items that came up in the final data. People were identifying safety concerns when it was raining really heavily, particularly if they were not in cars. A need for more community pools for hot weather. We updated the language around improving mental health support, particularly for families with more sensitive and exposed members. Better emergency planning and practice, especially for more vulnerable community members. Better overall community connection and empathy. Better collaboration with the city, between the cities and the county. Added into the summary a need for better agriculture and farm support for crop protection and food storage during extreme weather. And then also noting there was a desire for lower costs for just everyday and ongoing expenses because severe weather financial impacts tacked on top of other expensive things can be really challenging. So thank you all for the feedback and the final data. We really appreciated being able to revise this document one more time and pull these extra items into it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so that was the recap on phase 1. And I was gonna then shift to phase 2 engagement. Ben, can you help me on how much time we
have?
We have about 17 minutes according to our annotated agenda.
Okay. All right, I'm going to keep going unless anyone has any questions or on any of the phase 1 recap items. Okay, so let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about phase 2, which again, as a reminder, the phase 2 engagement was around getting people's ideas on things we can do to improve resilience and address severe weather impacts. So one of the main questions in sort of the standard set of engagement questions for this phase was a list of 28 possible resilience goals and asking people to assess, does this help me or my family? Does this harm me or my family? Does it depend how it's implemented? Things like that you all may recall. So in our first look at the data we have so far, and I will emphasize, we know some of you are still doing engagement on this topic, so it's not a complete data set yet. In general, it's been, there's been overwhelmingly positive support for most of the goals, and that most people are identifying them as being helpful to either themselves or their family. When we look at the list of goals, the types of goals that seem to have the most support are those around food affordability and access, improved access to information and education, increasing resilience of infrastructure like energy and transportation infrastructure, and then many of the goals that are around increasing tree canopy and green spaces, environmental protection or enhancement, and promotion of various types of sustainable practices. So those seem to be getting people are identifying those as being helpful the most. When we look at people's responses and those where they were saying, well, it really depends how it's implemented and whether this is going to be helpful or harmful. It seemed like goals related to affordable housing and land use planning were the items where there was the most sort of mix of feelings around that. And then we do have, negative reactions to some of these goals. I will note it's in much, much smaller numbers compared to the amount of support for them. But the negative reactions seem to be towards goals around affordable housing and then also around energy sector, like green technology, renewables type goals. And the reasons that we can tell based on the feedback that we've reviewed so far is generally folks are having a negative reaction either because they're concerned around the cost of these things, because they're not that interested in government involvement or extra regulations, or they don't view climate change as either a problem or a priority for themselves. So this is sort of key themes that are standing out of sort of that one question from phase 2 engagement. And I will also note that this is a mix of EJC member feedback as well as county general public feedback. So I think most of the negative reactions are coming from general public and not EJC community members. So I just would note that as well. I think I have another slide or two, and then we want to ask you all some questions to help react to this. If we can go to the next slide. We also had some engagement questions on, how do we make sure that resilience goals are benefiting our community members who are most vulnerable to climate impacts? And if we look at the themes and the type of feedback we've heard, there are suggestions to make sure we're doing very targeted support to specific community groups, with a lot of suggestions on how to do that, such as working through community-based organizations and healthcare service providers to do that. There's an interest in improved access to resources, a need for outreach and education, both when we're not in an emergency setting, situation in advance of those needs, but then also during emergencies as well. There's an identified need for sustainable funding. So there are a few comments on, if any of these goals are going to be helpful, there needs to be funding to make it possible. So that was identified, and in particularly in supporting community organizations to help do this work. And then also identified was, a need to continue to listen to our community members who are most vulnerable to climate impacts and consult with them as we try to improve resilience in the county. Okay, can't remember if I have one more slide on this. If we go to the next slide. Oh, yes, I did have one more. Okay, and then there were some questions that we're collecting feedback on. Do you have additional suggestions from this draft list of resilience goals? And so there were many suggestions, some of which were standing out to us. There's a suggestion to provide services to prevent eviction during severe weather. There was a few folks highlighted the need to better integrate mental health support services into the resilience goals. Some people were looking for, they couldn't quite see the specific climate hazard in the goals. So we're looking more for, well, what are we doing when it's smoky and that kind of thing. So that was something they were looking for. There were several suggestions on continued community engagement in the decision-making process and decision-making processes moving forward. One example of feedback received was desire for a BIPOC panel to provide input on all county decisions. There were suggestions to make sure the county is coordinating well with the cities. And then there were a lot of very specific policy or implementation suggestions that could fit within the broader goals. So suggestions around how we can work with neighborhoods to improve resiliency in their neighborhoods, how to create jobs that'll help with resilience, how to promote private sector innovation, lots of suggestions on things the county can help incentivize, suggestions for how to improve transportation, lots of people noting the need for more cooling and warming centers and making sure there's sufficient housing and shelter when we're not in an emergency, a need for wellness checks and communication about existing resources. Okay. So I think that's my initial recap on what we're seeing through the phase 2 engagement feedback. And I think the next slide, I'm going to pass it to you, Ben, to help us reflect.
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. So, I mean, obviously there's a lot there and capturing on a few slides, the immense amount of work that went into collecting this information, of course, is probably limiting. But there's kind of a high overarching question around, is there anything missing? And I think we can go back to, there's kind of two slides where it probably makes sense to look at. One would be 23, right? So those key themes that Jenna just kind of talked through. If you want to flash 23 key themes for phase 2. So here's some, and Jenna talked through some of those, right? So ensuring that these goals benefit the communities that you all connected with. Are there other themes at a high level that might be missing? And then I guess if you flash to just 21, maybe real quick, if these are some of the summaries around severe weather and some of the needs. So as you just reacquaint yourself with what Jenna just created, and then on slide 22, again, seeing some of the reactions around some of the concepts, right, around food affordability, access to information, et cetera. So then just going back to slide 23, targeted support, improved access, outreach and education, sustainable funding, listen and consult. And as you reflect back on all that Jenna shared, is there anything missing, or is there anything that you all want to kind of bring into this space to make sure that we have clarity on what you heard? So this is, again, just a chance to, both offer some input into the overall summary that was just provided, to identify things that might be critically missing that you all want to name in terms of your community, or if there's something that's really resonating that you just want to give more life to. So I just want to create some space for folks.
Hi, Ben, this is Gabriela.
Yeah, Gabriela.
I remember some of the feedback on phase 2 was a high cost of electricity. Capture that.
The high cost of electricity? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I remember that was one of the comments that kept coming. the high cost of electricity, and it was for either extreme cold or extreme hot because of the heater or the AC. That's okay.
That's great. And so there's probably a couple places where you might see that, but I think, Gabriella, what I appreciate is just lifting up, like, I think slide 22, when you think about some of the needs, particularly around lower costs for everyday and ongoing, which connects to that. I think funding assistance on some of the resources, if we think about heating and cooling as a resource. But Gabrielle, I appreciate you just naming it explicitly, as recognizing that the cost of energy overlaid with hot and cold weather is really important to be specific about. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to make another comment. Also, I remember comments about the good weatherization of windows and doors. Or it was mostly apartment units and trailer homes, mobile homes, that those comments came through. So it was like windows and doors, like the cool comes through or like the heat comes through. There's no weatherization.
Good. I know, Gabriella, it was a little hard for me to hear, so what I thought I was hearing was just a specific
Okay,
impact.
I got the microphone a little closer. Thank you.
That sounds way better.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
okay. Yes, and I lean forward. So yeah, I was sharing about the comments about the weatherization on the doors and windows for cold and hot weather in apartment complexes and mobile homes.
That's great.
So also that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gabrielle. And Jenna and team, this may be one of the many examples that we begin to hear. I mean, that when I hear some of what you're saying, Gabriella, around the relationship with themes of things like targeted support and concepts or tactics around like things like weatherization, like how do you think about weatherization in the context of what you all have been hearing? And so that's just an example, right, of thinking about either kind of building standards or particular types of homes, like mobile homes that could be uniquely impacted by some of these challenges. Thank you for that. Anything else that's coming up for folks? We want to go back to some of the themes at a high level. So there's some of these themes, the high level themes on slide 4 as well. Obviously, these are high level. They're described to talk to a lot of different things. So I don't know if there's any themes that are missing, or if there's anything that you want to name that kind of speaks to what you see here. Yeah, Jude, is that camera on, ready to jump in?
Yeah, I think these are really great summaries, and I really appreciate that. Instead of the high level would have specifics around sort of each sector. So around workforce development, around different neighborhood situations, around sustainable funding for supporting the food distribution system or the farming systems. And I think that may come in more with sort of what I've been trying to do is, because phase 4 and phase 2 are overlappingly redundant with across different issues and policies, as we might see in the policy list, is trying to make that intersection between them. So I don't exactly know where these engagement reports go, but that's my reflection on this high level list. They're all really great, but where do we get really specific about the specific support, the specific funding, and how that gets played out on the ground?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Jude, and maybe this, as we transition to the next part of our conversation as well, I think that level of specificity and like, where do things go? Right. And so I know Tracy might speak to a little bit of this, right? When you're thinking about policies, what does it mean to have targeted support? Right, when you're talking about an incentive model, or what does it need to have, improved access for who and what circumstances, right? So I think, Jude, you're teeing up some of the conversation that I know folks will want to have, and I guess, I don't know, looking to Jenny and Jenna and team, if there are ways that we should be thinking about, right? How do we take the high level themes and what's their relationship to the application to policy and strategy? So I don't know if there's a precursor answer for now, and then we kind of continue to test it out as we have these conversations, but maybe it'll help folks as we move into the discussion on greenhouse gas reduction goals and policies, to get us thinking about, like, how do we apply these type of themes? Even though these were around resilience, I would offer probably we'd see a lot of these same type of key themes show up for GHG reduction as well.
Yeah, this is Jenna. I think then what you're saying is, I think starting to talk about it today, particularly with when we look at the greenhouse gas reduction list, or if anything is coming to mind looking at this list, that's good too. But I think the equity lens discussion, I think is a really good opportunity to, again, this is what I'm hearing from my community. So, Jude, like, from the farming community, this is the type of things that I'm hearing people needing, or, and we'll then figure out, right? Is it, a comp plan it is still a pretty general document. So I will just note that a lot of details get worked out after it gets adopted. So the first step is to figure out what the high level policies and goals are, and then work from there. So there may be some details that don't end up, specifically laid out in a comprehensive plan. But I think the key is, are we getting the concepts? Are we getting good policies that, and are we calling attention to areas that need more focus, so that when it comes to the applying to get funding and things like that, we have good policies to help frame that. So.
Yeah, that's helpful, Jen. And I just know this will be, predictably a thing that's going to keep coming up for folks, right? Is balancing kind of what's a very high level, comprehensive plan that sets the direction and lays out goals and policies. And the challenge of what I imagine many folks would say here, it's like, well, it depends on how you do it. And I think we're going to be grappling with that as a group, as we apply the EJ lens, and as we have some of these subsequent conversations. But Jude, I appreciate you just naming it, because I think that is both an opportunity and one of the things that we'll be challenged by as we try to get to, right, this tension between the specific details that would operationalize any particular policy and the high level framing that kind of shows up in a growth management comprehensive plan. Other just reflections on the themes before we'll take a break, and then we'll move into the greenhouse gas reduction policies. Okay. Well, and folks, certainly, this is a reflection of y'all's work. So I'll just express some appreciation for the Clark County team and helping to summarize, and of course, appreciation for you all for the work to get the words that are on paper here. It's really a reflection of the incredible work that y'all did to connect with community. Okay, well, it's 4:37. Let's take 10 minutes. We'll come back at 4:47. And then we'll pass the floor to Tracy, who will move us through the greenhouse gas reduction. Yeah, 10 minutes, 4:38. See you then.
Okay. All right. Can you mute us, Amy?
Is it mute? Yes.
No.
Okay, let's begin to make our way back. I think I said 4:48, but it's 4:47 on the slide, so I will abide by what's on the screen. But if folks can give a thumbs up, camera on, some indication that you're back with us, that would be great. Thank you. So I'm going to pass this to Tracy, and as I said earlier, we're talk through some a draft set of goals, and then we're going to create some space for you all kind of continue that reflection on engagement and what you've heard from community to explore where there's alignment and how the priorities of community are showing up in these draft goals, or where they're not, and what might be missing either from a policy or strategy perspective. So I'm gonna
All right, thank you. Okay, can we go on to the next slide, please? Okay, so as Ben mentioned, our goal today is to present on the draft list of greenhouse gas emissions reductions goals and policies. And we're looking for alignment with your community feedback that you've been collecting, and just checking to make sure that we have a good comprehensive list for moving forward. So next slide, please. Some of the questions that we'll be asking you at the end, I just wanted to open those up here at the beginning. What is most aligning with what you've heard and what your communities care about? Are your community's priorities reflected in these policies? And is there anything missing? So just to kind of seed that as we go into the conversation, for you to be thinking as we're talking about these goals and policies. And then I also want to let you know what's going to be coming up after our conversation. So after today's meeting, we will be integrating feedback from your group, also from the CAG meeting that we had this month, on the initial list of goals and policies. And then the project team will be doing the first initial high-level analysis of the greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals and policies. And then we will be bringing these goals and policies back to you in December for discussion using the equity lens. So we'll take a break in November and go to resilience for equity lens, and then come back in December with the greenhouse gas emissions reductions. Next slide, please. Here is just a high-level overview so that you kind of know what the emissions reduction planning process looks like. We shared with you this summer the greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which identifies and quantifies local emission sources, and then also highlights the areas that we should be focused on potential sources for mitigation or emissions reduction. We're now in step 2 of this planning process, which is identifying the actions, and then with a focus in those high impact sectors or those areas where the emissions are largest. And we're going to be doing this prioritization and analysis using a framework that we have adopted for this project, and that has been approved or consented to by the CAG. So that will just identify which ones are most aligned with Clark County priorities. And then we will evaluate the effectiveness of the goals and policies that you're seeing. Then we will come and do the equity lens review of the goals and policies, and you will see that, as I said, back in December for greenhouse gas emissions reduction back here with the EJC. And then your work is done on this for a little while. We take it to the internal project team, and we look at we calculate out emissions reductions potential. Then we'll come back to the group and look at actually setting some targets. And then in the in the comprehensive plan, as step 5, these policies will get integrated into the comprehensive plan. And then there will have to be some regular updating and tracking of progress that happens with each periodic review of the comprehensive plan. So again, we're in step 2, but there is a lot more to come regarding how these goals and policies will get further analyzed, and then finally a set of policies will get adopted into the comprehensive plan. And next one here. To keep in mind, the problem that we're trying to solve is in the greenhouse gas emissions reduction sub-element, is how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that are produced in Clark County to net zero by 2050, while also supporting a reduction in vehicle miles traveled per person and creating a benefit to our most vulnerable community members. That is the charge of this piece of the project. So let's take a look at the primary emission sources, and that's on the next slide. So again, these are the emissions that we are trying to come up with policies for reduction. In Clark County, the largest sources of local emissions are about even with building energy and transportation. Building energy is really the electricity and natural gas that is used in buildings to do all of the things that we do in office and retail and homes and industrial facilities. And so it's electricity and natural gas mainly. Transportation is the gasoline and diesel that is used for driving cars, trucks, buses, heavy duty trucks, operating equipment. It's really about, there are 2 ways to reduce emissions here mainly is reduce the amount of fuel used by reducing driving, and reducing the impact of the miles that are driven by reducing the emissions in the fuel used. So that's transportation. Agriculture, forestry, and land use is also a pretty significant source in Clark County, and this mainly comes in Clark County from forestry and land use. And so this is things like logging and loss of trees, and then also the fuel and fertilizers that go into agriculture. Industrial processes and product use is in Clark County mainly refrigerants. Refrigerants are the chemicals that make air cold in like fridges and freezers and air conditioning units. So that's where those emissions come from. And then solid waste and wastewater is garbage, sewer, and septic systems, the emissions related to those. Let's go on to the next slide. So now that we know where the emissions are coming from, we need to look to policies to reduce those emissions. We have collected comments through a bunch of different means. We have to date, last time I counted over 400 comments that have been collected through a brainstorm survey that we did with the CAG, meetings, emails, and so we have pulled together those comments, and we have put together a comment tracker to be able to identify which comments have come in, and then be able to track where it is that we believe that they are applying to, so that we can tell that comments have been incorporated or addressed in the appropriate way. So we have incorporated in what you are about to see let's see, emails starting in July when we shifted to greenhouse gas emissions reduction, and then meetings, except we have not yet built in your comments to the last meeting that we had. So that will be incorporated before we move on to the next stage of analysis. And so we have a couple more comments there to integrate, and then whatever we discussed today. And we have, with all of these comments, created a draft list of greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals and policies. And then moving forward from today, we're really going to concentrate on the feedback that comes from your outreach efforts that's reported back, and then in these meetings. So this is really going to be the main space for you to give us the feedback for finalizing these goals and policies. In the list of goals and policies that we sent out to you and that we're about to go through, we have grouped the goals and policies according to the major emissions reduction categories. So really related to those 5 categories that I just went through: the buildings and transportation, and agriculture and forestry, waste. We consolidated comments into the goals and policies and tried to capture and synthesize main points, and use plain language as much as possible. We tried to reduce the amount of jargon that shows up in these because it can get awfully jargony. And then we also tried to create goals and policies that are simple and high level. So as you're looking through them, you may not see the level of specificity of a specific comment that you've made, but I would encourage you to look at whether your comments could be included in some of the more high level language that we've used to define these goals and policies. And so with that context, let's take a quick look on the next slide at just the goal and policy list that you received before the meeting. So just to make sure that everybody knows what you're looking at, the emissions sector, or group of sectors in some cases, because there were a couple that we grouped together, appear in that kind of blue turquoise header, and then the goal is in bold there, and it's labeled with a G. So that's the overarching goal, and then the policies appear below that. So then each of those policies kind of relate under that umbrella goal. So much like the resilience goals and policies that you saw before. So with that, let's go ahead and take a quick look at these goals and policies, the draft list that we have for you. And then after that, we'll give you some individual time to take a look at them individually before we have our group discussion. So the first grouping is building energy. So we have 5 goals and 16 policies that address electricity and natural gas use in buildings through efforts like efficiency, renewable energy development, electrification, and green building practices. On the next slide, there are 5 goals and 14 policies under transportation. And these all work to reduce emissions from gasoline and diesel use in vehicles. And again, there are really 2 methods. One is to drive less, and the other is to reduce the emissions from driving. So in general, these goals and policies focus on getting people out of cars, expanding the use of public transportation, promoting widespread and easy use of lower greenhouse gas emissions electric vehicles, and supportive actions there. In the next sector, we have agriculture, forestry, and land use. So in this category, we have 5 goals and 13 policies. And these focus on promoting, maintaining, and protecting natural areas and tree canopy, access to urban farming, and access to sustainable agriculture. And then the final grouping that we have is additional categories, because they kind of there are fewer of them, so we put them together. So this is, again, industrial process and product use, which is refrigerants, the chemicals that work in your air conditioning and refrigerators, waste and wastewater, and consumption. So all of those are grouped together here, and we have 4 goals and 9 policies, and they promote waste reduction, from food waste, garbage, and they promote repair, reuse, and resale economy. And then there's also one here for specifically for the county internally. So these are the overall goals and policies that are in this list. With that, we would like to give you a little bit of time, and I don't know if Ben wants to give you a little bit more instruction here on reviewing this list of goals and policies individually, and take a little bit of time to reflect before we have group discussion. Ben, I will let you give more context if you like.
Sure. So thank you, Maria. And I know this went out in the packet and we didn't ask you to spend a bunch of time with it. So we want to create a little bit of space to kind of work off, I guess, online, but off camera, if you will. I guess you can be on camera. But what we want to do, and then can you actually pull up slide 40 that has the questions? Because we want to give you some time to actually review a set of questions. And these are relatively connected to the theme from today, right? What's most aligning with what you heard? What do your communities care about as you review these policies? Are your community's priorities reflected? Is there anything missing? And so we didn't ask you. Maria's put in the chat a link to what Tracy just walked through in a table format. And we'd love to give you, say, 10 minutes or so to kind of read through the goal and the policy language and reflect through these questions. What I'd like to do is when we come back, just do a roundtable conversation. So for some of you, that might be really easy. You can go through and say, this doesn't seem right. This feels really connected. This is what I would add. For others, it might be a little more challenging. Maybe you haven't had these conversations. Right, I know, Sunny, you're jumping in midway through this process. I don't know how engaged you've been, but one of the things that we'll ask you is kind of channel your community. Right, can't channel what you understand, what you know, what you've experienced, and what you've heard from folks as you look through these policies. I guess I'll pause and see if there's any questions around what we're asking you to do. We're going to kind of review and then come back and try to respond to these questions. Any questions or any additional context that would be helpful? Okay, so it's 5:06. Why don't we take 10 minutes? You got the link in your email. You got a link in the chat. Take 10 minutes. We'll come back. We'll give you 11 minutes and a half or whatever it is. We'll come back at 5:17. And then we'll do a roundtable conversation. I'll just kind of call on folks. I'm just giving you a heads up that I'm going to kind of go person by person, just give you an opportunity to reflect back on these questions. So let's come back in 10, but you can work independently between now and then. Thanks. Take another minute for folks to finish review. Does anybody need another minute? Okay. So we are going to do a round table, which basically means we'll just we'll just kind of call on folks in no particular order, unless someone wants to volunteer to go first, and then we can track it that way. So if I have a brave volunteer, you'll start it out, and we'll go as far as we can go. Josh, thank you.
You got it, Ben. Well, I just wanted to jump in. I don't have a ton of feedback because I do think it aligns well with what, I saw in a lot of our survey responses. The one thing that I want to throw out there is that I'm always a proponent of creating subsidies, incentives, or rebates as opposed to mandates that can make it more expensive in order to either do business or as a consumer. So I think that if we get to the point of suggesting anything along those lines, I would personally be a proponent of making it easier to adopt these lower emission policies and goals, as opposed to making it potentially more expensive.
And what makes it more expensive? Josh, can you help me understand? So you're suggesting subsidies and rebates. What's the
Yeah. So let me pull up one that I saw. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so under goal 3, support energy efficiency for buildings community-wide, policy 1, provide incentives for, and then in parentheses, or require upon sale, energy audits and energy performance standards for commercial and residential properties, right? So I think that a huge area of opportunity as we talk about these goals is in the commercial side of our community. Both from a building standpoint as well as a transportation standpoint. I think we focus a lot on residential and consumerism, but I think that production and building commercial building space is huge. But my point is, when we require these things upon sale, that makes the cost of doing that business so much higher. There's examples in our community right now around I believe it's like updating plumbing or water runoff that is making it incredibly expensive for certain businesses in order to start anew or even older businesses to sell. And what I don't want to see is that we create solutions with such high barriers to access that they become unused. So again, I just, from a really personal standpoint, I think if we are going down a path that involves advocating for policy change that would mandate change, we need to enact that or make it achievable by creating a fiscal solution for making that achievable, as opposed to creating fiscal barriers.
Yeah, no, thank you for just elevating that example and putting it so explicitly clear. Thank you, Josh.
Yep.
Like I see your agreement. Okay, so Josh led the way. We'll see how far we get with just folks raising their hand, but I am going to call on everybody, so you can't just not raise your hand. Anna, jump in, please.
Thank you. I more so have a question regarding the document that I just went through. So after listening through, throughout the conversation and after reading it, nothing really specifies whether it is also friendly to the undocumented community. I understand that, when it comes to federal money, it is very, well, if not, like we can't use federal money to help our undocumented community. So that would be my biggest concern after reading this document of like, where is the explicit message that goes to the undocumented community? If we want to do this type of work, right, We want to make sure that we get every single community out there. And with that being said, undocumented community, we're huge, we're here. And so we need to be added, not as an afterthought, but within the process of doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. So maybe a question back, and then I will look to the team to help us understand kind of where does the naming of different communities that may experience vulnerability, et cetera, be important. But was there a place within the policies that particularly, Anna, relate to what you've heard or the experience of undocumented folks?
Yes. So pretty much where it says any type of programming, any type of like monetary thing that it's tied to a program, we understand the undocumented community cannot apply for that. So if that's the case, we need to be very explicit. If this is for everyone, or if the undocumented community is being excluded, because as we know, and as I heard, and since I am part of that of this community, I know for a fact that when it comes to any type of programming coming from federal government, my family, myself, we can't really get anything from it. So that's one of the things that I really want to be explicit with, at least with this. Like, if we can get some sort of programming that includes the undocumented community, great. But if not, we need to be very, very clear on who is it for and who is it not for.
Yeah, and I appreciate you naming that. And so it's kind of the exclusion of an entire population by either structure or policy. So there's an attentiveness to particularly monetary programmatic programs that are tied to kind of fiscal incentives, et cetera. And then I guess, Jenna, maybe I'll ask you, right, like this broader piece of like how and where in a comp plan, for example, because I can imagine there's a layer of specificity for many of the communities around the table. Like, where does it live to name, right? If we say the EJ communities include, for example, undocumented populations, like where does that live in a comp plan? And then Gabriella, I see your hand as well.
Yeah, so we have a few different places, and I think we're gonna need to think about, I think we wanna listen to what you have to say and then think about, what are our options for how to address these ideas. We have, we'll have a section in the comp plan with background information. So if there's anything that comes up that's more about context setting or history or framing that we want to include, that may belong there, for instance. Then we'll have goals and policies. So there may be suggestions where we should actually be changing the language of those goals and policies to better reflect these ideas. We have the option to, sort of nested below policies to include equity strategies or considerations or things like that, so we can try to create some more focus there. And then I guess other ways, there could be policies we need to add or policies you might want to recommend, maybe they shouldn't be on the list because they're creating so much harm. So I think we have a few different ways to get at these ideas, and I think at least where I'm at right now, and I'm assuming Tracy is in a similar place, I think my main interest is understanding what's standing out, and then we can go and think about how might we address this. And I guess the one other thing I would say is, you all may have seen at the very top of the draft goal and policy list, we did just put a placeholder, sort of overarching equity or environmental justice goal placeholder, because I think we keep thinking that when I was reviewing this first draft with Tracy, we were struggling with we keep wanting to add like something about, benefiting most vulnerable community members to like every single policy and goal. And so we were debating between where is it adding that language into specific goals, and where is it a universal policy or goal that applies to everything on the list. So I think that's just one other idea we have as a way to get at some of these ideas. So that was a longer answer than I meant to give, but hopefully helps a little bit with how we're thinking about this.
No, that's great, Jenna, because I think there's likely going to be a consistent theme around some of those questions. How do we get to the level of specificity that I think many folks may wonder, and then just capturing, and I think both Josh and Anna have named, right, being really cautious as we think about policies that do not, by their very nature, exclude people, right? And Anna, your example, right? So is there eligibility or other kind of requirements around particularly fiscally supported programs? And then to Josh's point, that it doesn't, create barriers because of the way that it's set up and structured. Gabriella?
Yes, and thank you, Anna, for bringing this up, because that was one of the comments I was going to make. As part of the comp plan, I have mentioned this several times, and because of federal money usually doesn't go to undocumented communities, one of the suggestions that I gave for the comp plan was, instead of looking at when there's an application process, we looked at the gross income, right? For people, families, to be able to apply to any kind of rebate. Sorry, there's a train going on. I'll give it a minute. Okay, I think it's done. So instead of looking at the gross income for families or individuals, is to look at the income after the taxes, because this community, even though doesn't have a Social Security number per se, they do have an IT number, or they have an IT number that they file taxes, and they actually pay higher tax than anybody else, and they don't receive any benefit. So to be able to apply for any program for the comp plan, housing, or anything else, and instead of asking for gross income, to look at the income after taxes. Because sometimes most often than not, they do not qualify for those rebates or those that kind of support, because if they have, of the two people in the family, they have a full-time job and a part-time on top of that, they don't qualify for those rebates, and they need to do this to be able to afford to pay to put a roof over their heads, plus the food, and et cetera, and this is because of the higher taxes they pay as well. So usually those taxes don't go into that account. So that was one of the recommendations I made for the comp plan, and I will make that same recommendation for this as a way to support this community, because yes, usually federal money doesn't go towards that, but if it's going to be based on income level, that might be something that this could be addressed for equity issues. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. So, and I'll kind of ask you a follow-up too, and I guess I'll ask this of everyone, right? So I think one of the things that, at least in these first three comments, is concerns around like how a policy would be implemented and who may be excluded, or what barriers may be created, or ensuring that we have some caution. And so in that example, Gabriella, around any program or any policy that's related to income requirements, right? You're giving us a caution, right? Like if you need to think about how you design it in this way. I guess within that, like I heard you talk about rebates or housing supports. Are there priorities that really reflect, like when you read the goals, are you seeing the priorities of your communities? Like, to set the challenge or barrier aside for a second, are there goal areas or goals that are missing that feel really important to communities that you work with?
I'm sorry, there is some noise coming through the window, so I'll wait.
We can't hear the background, but I see Amy trying to close windows to make it quieter on your end, at least.
So, so on the goals, so the feedback from the community, because we're doing this work from, phase 1 through now, we're going through phase 4. Some of the things that I've heard is, how is it that we are going to have just as simple as the more electric vehicles and the cost of those electric vehicles to be more affordable, right? And also there was a question about well, isn't it like making those batteries for the vehicles, the electric vehicles, more polluting than anything else, things like that. So I got those kind of questions. And also, how is it that electricity is going to go down if they are tearing down the biggest dam in the Pacific Northwest? So those things came up on the community feedback, and I was just reading through the goals to reduce emissions, right, for miles driven and replace as much as possible with EVs. So those are some of the concerns, and also about we have our neighbor state, Oregon, having the light rain, the light train, right? But we don't have anything in that sort of thing here. We have only the Vine or bus transportation, but no light train. So there was a comment, actually more than one, several ones, having a light train going through the most common places that people go through for a faster travel time throughout the city instead of the bus, because apparently the bus takes too long. So those are some of the feedback that I got that I could see from the goals that we have in this document.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Gabriela. And I appreciate, just at a high level thinking about, right, adding train and where things go is really important. So, that kind of geographic attention to kind of who would benefit, just picking up your last comment. Thank you. Who wants to volunteer to go next before I have to call on you? Abby, thank you.
Problem. So I kind of grouped things into two categories of aligns or just like a little more thought needed, I guess, or just like an extra 2 cents. I'll start with the more thought needed category because it's less than the aligns category. So for providing incentives to switching to electric high efficiency appliances, and then county collaborate with existing service providers to pick up and properly dispose of appliances. Those were the things that from our engagement, I would kind of put in the category of things that folks kind of said, like, yeah, it sounds great in theory, but they just don't trust that it would be accessible to them. And so I think that if there was really specific language about how it would be done, or making it seem like there isn't any sort of like money on their end that's needed, it would be more clear. But when that was brought up, it was often brought up as like, okay, cool, but like, will that actually be available? So that's, that stood out to me. And then in terms of encouraging a use of public transit community-wide, I wanted to also specify that I think some infrastructure changes would be needed to do that from other community engagement that was actually outside of EJC, but I think is relevant here. I know that people mentioned not feeling safe in certain areas of the county using public transportation, especially if it's requiring a lot of walking in between stops. Like if it's in an area like in North County that maybe doesn't feel, people talk about certain neighborhoods or cities that don't feel as friendly to like the BIPOC or LGBTQ community. So just making sure there was like more stops closer to important destinations is one thing that stood out. On that same token, making jobs and daily services closer to where people live I think that's huge. And a lot of people talked about that as being necessary for environmental reasons to require less driving and public transportation, but also just because that's huge and things need to be more accessible for people in their neighborhoods. The support for energy efficiency for buildings community-wide, I thought sounded like it aligned just because it looks like it's putting a lot of the responsibility on building owners and kind of taking the burden off of renters. What else? And then everything regarding green spaces and planting more trees and less barriers to quality agriculture all seemed very aligned with what people said in community engagement.
That's awesome. Good. Thank you, Abby. I appreciate you kind of having your categories there around the alignment and then some areas of potential concern around how something might be implemented. And I think, the other piece that may resonate with folks also is kind of the infrastructure that's necessary. I mean, I think your example for transportation is a good one, right? So you can inspire, utilization, but if it's not surrounded with the type of infrastructure in your example to make people feel safe using it, you might exclude certain folks that otherwise would benefit. Yes, Sunny, please.
I can unmute. Hey everyone. So I think that looking through it, there were definitely around transportation. And just for context, I'm representing folks who are unhoused. I think similarly to some of the other comments that this is a tough one to have, for first kind of recognition that disproportionate impacts for folks that are unhoused, also recognizing folks that are unsheltered. Severe weather is something that is impacting folks that are outside in it at a much more significant rate. And a lot of the stuff when we're talking about housing and all those pieces, just recognition that it's not going to align because it's not something that is like presently a reality. So I just want to acknowledge that piece of it. I did really appreciate the discussion around public transportation when we're thinking about making sure public transportation is readily available. Thinking about vehicles and those sorts of things, that doesn't, for many of our folks, whether they have recently unhoused, currently unhoused, the reality is that feels a bit more like something that is unattainable to them. So it wasn't necessarily something that was coming up. We definitely heard appreciation for spaces that are green, being able to access spaces that are, with tree coverage and stuff like that. So that definitely is appreciated, and recognition that folks that are unhoused and unsheltered typically are in locations that none of us want to be. It is not a location that we would enjoy camping or that sort of thing. So I think that those are the pieces. I kind of struggle with some of the pieces in that they make sense for me, who's someone who's inside, has a space to call my own, and recognition that that isn't going to necessarily be the piece that is coming up consistently for folks who are unhoused. There was a mention of kind of emergency management services, and that's something that is very central to the work that I'm doing. We're thinking about what are the services available when we're talking about very hot weather, low temperatures. That's when folks are most in danger. So being able to have quick response and the reliance on our homeless response system does make that difficult. Transparently, we work very, very hard to make sure that we're spreading the word and all that sort of stuff. So those are the pieces that I guess didn't necessarily align, more so because the population is in a just completely different situation. But definitely the public transportation in particular, I was really happy to see that.
Yeah, thank you, Sunny. And I guess for Jenna and team, right, because I do think, when you're looking at greenhouse gas emission, which, to many of your points, right, Sunny, like there's this kind of disconnect between an unsheltered and houseless population and some of the primary ways, both contributors, right, as Tracy started, what's driving GHG emission, and then some of the tactics that address those contributors. And I guess, like, Jenna, when you think about Sunny's comments. I guess I keep putting you on the spot, right? Like there's other places within growth management, comprehensive planning. Like where does that conversation live around unsheltered populations, around increasing, housing access, affordable housing, wraparound supports, PSH, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so I think, so some of these things, right, I think are gonna show up in the resilience sub-element, right? I think there's a much stronger overlap, right, with the severe weather impacts like Sunny was mentioning, with a very vulnerable population of people who don't have housing. So I think it's probably going to be, for the climate work, right, more show up in resilience than greenhouse gas reduction. And then there's a housing chapter in the comprehensive plan and things like that, which is getting into shelter beds and affordable housing options and things like that. So there are other places in the larger comprehensive planning process that should also be helping with some of these other needs. So so that's, I guess, just an initial reaction. And then, but I think, like Sunny was sort of highlighting, like transportation is really important. Greenhouse gas emissions aside, right? If there's some things on this list that would be helpful, right, and help meet some really key needs for your community, that seems like a really important thing to note, right? But when we are talking specifically around, it may not be needed or prioritized because of the pollution reasons, right? But it's a priority for helping meet community member needs. So yeah. I think that's really helpful to know. And right, we are tasked with not only reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but making sure we're benefiting community members who are most vulnerable to the impacts, right? So I feel like that's a really nice example there.
Yeah, thanks, John. I just wanted to make sure folks are continuing to hold kind of the big picture, that even though that we're talking in this very pointed space. But Sunny, I appreciate you just naming it so explicitly. Thank you. Rebecca, please.
Okay. So we have done our engagement around a lot of these questions. Sorry, I'm on my phone, so I'm trying to pull up different windows. Okay. So in general, I would say there's a lot of alignment. And just as a reminder, I'm from the Free Clinic of Southwest Washington. A lot of our patients are undocumented. And so I'm trying to bear that in mind as well. So I have a lot of similar comments to Gabriella and others. In general, some of the questions or the proposed policies around building energy, some of those things, a lot of the individuals in our focus groups sort of recognize the benefit that can come from doing that, although I don't know anyone felt real passionately about some of those policies. So, I mean, there was alignment in some sense, but there was definitely sort of a disconnect, I felt like, from their everyday lives. So a recognition that this is useful, but felt like it didn't really apply to them. Transition to electric appliances, that was kind of another sort of interesting one from I thought it was interesting anyways, is that participants definitely were sort of, I heard a couple of times, well, I don't use a lot of those appliances anyways. And so switching to electric or high efficiency doesn't feel, again, super useful to me. Like I'm not using my dishwasher because it uses too much water and it takes too long. I'm just going to hand wash it in the sink. So that felt also like there was a little bit of a disconnect. When it came to transitioning to renewable energy and adoption of electric vehicles, there was a pretty significant concern about the cost and potential harm that comes from creating and disposing of some of the materials needed for electric vehicle batteries, solar panels. That came up quite a bit, is, well, how do we create these things and what's that doing to the environment, and what do we do when we no longer need them? Let's see, promoting active transportation through walking, bicycling, rolling. This was another one that I thought aligned, or the group felt like aligned pretty closely for them, which is there was a definite recognition that this would be really beneficial if public sidewalks in particular were safer. So that came up pretty frequently, that we would love to be able to walk and bike more, and that would be really beneficial for people's health, especially if they saw other people doing it more often. They would be more willing to do it more often. And there's a definite incentive. They felt like that this would be good for the environmental health, but also our physical health. And the big thing was that I've heard this mentioned before too, is the sidewalks. They felt like there'd have to be an improvement in safety, particularly around lighting and having more well-lit sidewalks, especially if people are walking between bus stops at night. There's a definite concern that, you know, I'd love to walk more, but I need to feel safer if I'm going to do it. What else did I want to talk about? Very similar around public transit. They felt like there would need to be an improvement in bus stops in order for people to stop using their cars and start using public transit more. And this came up in one of our previous conversations too, is more education about how to use the transit system. Some people just felt like they didn't have enough, they didn't feel comfortable enough jumping into that world without more information about how to use it. Let's see. I think that was it. Those were my notes.
That's great. Thank you, Rebecca. And I appreciate just, you know, some of the, I think that's the first time we heard some of the unintended maybe consequences and concerns around as we move to one thing, particularly around waste cycles and generation. So I appreciate that. And then this just recurring theme around infrastructure investments and feelings of safety overlaid with the benefits of wellness. Anandra, jump in.
Yeah, Rebecca mentioned a lot of things that I've also been hearing pretty similarly to transportation. However, in our last town hall, the agriculture and land use was the one that people were more gravitated towards more. That felt like it did. They resonated more with that one than the other two, the transportation and energy, the building energy. But from those two, transportation and building energy, transportation, it also felt like it had to be a little bit emphasized as well. Yes, I think that, like Rebecca said, if there's more people using the sidewalks and the bike lanes and transportation, that it will make it feel safer. Fourth Plain Boulevard has been doing some updates, and some folks have said that it's great, but they wish that there would have been more promotion around it. Like, how do you even get around that, you know, with the new updates? So I know that the city does have their team called Get There Vancouver, and they recently had an event at the Commons, and we, you know, got folks kind of know how to ride the bus. However, there's some other organizations that say, like, we don't know that there's all these resources happening. Can the county help promote those kind of things as well? Like, there are some resources where they try to educate the public about, you know, how to use certain resources that's already there. So if there's a way that the county can help promote those things. But I think I wanted to make one more point, and now I lost my train of thought. I hope that covered most of that.
Yeah, well, thank you, Amanda. It certainly ties with our earlier conversation around some of the findings from the community engagement report out. And if it comes back to you, just come back in. Danya, you had put in the chat, you know, I think something really important to just name at a high level. Just, you know, folks around it's emergency response, right? How do you need support when the power goes out during severe weather, but also just this overlay of the worry of being unhoused during severe weather. So Danya, I didn't know if you wanted to add any more context to what you put in the chat.
No, I kind of wanted to just share, you know, on a general level of all the feedback that I was reading through from the surveys and just having conversations with my community. Because now, you know, looking at like the goals and the policies, it's like I said, it's more on a higher level where they're not even thinking about like reducing building energy emissions, a lot of that for like my community is like way over their heads. When I talk about JC or this topic, it's almost like they're in survival mode. You know what I mean? Like they can't even take a few steps further to think about some of this stuff. But this is really important stuff, like all these steps to prevent problems when it does come to severe weather is perfect. But I think just for my community, how to figure out like how do I make that connection or bridge that gap, and it might not be, and it's definitely not something that I can do in the next few months, but it's a place to start and start having these conversations. And it's all about education, and some of the pointers that I like about it is the outreach and the collaborations and the educating community about these things and why it's important to be energy efficient, and so building them up to being able to sustain themselves when they do come to the moments that they are supposed to push through these things. But I just wanted to share that because I feel like a lot of my feedback from the community, it's raw and it's real, but it is a little like disconnected and a little far from what maybe I'm thinking or expecting. So I just wanted to throw it out there.
I appreciate you naming it, Danya, and you've done a really good job across our entire time together, just emphasizing the reality of that folks are just day to day, right? Just in survival mode, I think you said. And and I do think that's an opportunity and a challenge for us, right? Like I know we were talking about this before we came into the space behind the scenes. I was like, how much does community care about the fleet for Clark County? Like how whether you all have the cars that government drives are electric. How does that affect my day to day? And I think, these is a global issue, right? But I think that survival mode and the day to day and how do we make this relevant, and just really appreciate the way you've continued to frame that, Danya. Tavi, jump in.
Hello. So I just wanted to point out some of the points that I feel like are in alignment with the youth that we've been engaging with. I think a really important thing for the youth is education. So I feel like, are in alignment with providing education for public transit services, expanding educational awareness and volunteer engagement, opportunities of parks and the values of trees and natural areas, and promoting active transportation through walking and bicycling. Something that Ironman Teen has our programs about climate change. And we talk about walkability and how it pertains to their communities. So far, we've done it for Portland, but we're planning to do it for Vancouver students as well. But things around that I think would resonate with our youth, just because they're sponges, so they're going to take in a lot of information when they can, especially if it's hands-on activity. So when you mention that there's possibility for expanding education in terms of like planting trees, that's really hands-on and it will resonate with them and will stick with them. So education and things that are hands-on for youth especially, I think will be really beneficial. One, for them to think of their lives and their future, but also for their communities as well. But I think that's what stood out to me a lot, was that education piece, and making sure that it's also going to be accessible for overburdened communities. I think putting that piece into the goals would be really nice, and how we're going to be able to reach these communities, whether that's through us, like community-based organizations, or other means.
Yeah, thank you, Tavi. I love it, not just the alignment with the goals, but how do folks touch the goals, if that's the way to say it, right? And really contribute and be a part of the implementation. Thanks for naming that. Other hands. I don't know who hasn't gone.
then, well, somebody else decides to go, I want to mention something that I totally forgot. Goal 12 and 13 talked about sustainable agriculture and landscaping. Some of the feedback from the community is that chemicals are sprayed on trees in public places, and then they get dry out. So, and several comments came out of that, so I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah,
all.
thank you. Yeah, so thinking about sustainable practices and some of the impacts there. So, great, thank you. All right, man, I can see you. You look like you're ready to go. I'm going to call on you.
Okay. I think most of the item on the list matching what we think in our community. Just the same thing that we mentioned, the strict safety, especially strict lights, and we heard that some of them there's some strict around, certain area here don't have light, and people really like that. And also the concern is with the EV adoption. A lot of some people actually couldn't find the charge compatible, charging station. So we make sure that the number of chargers, enough for people, and then also they got to be standardized, or somehow it had to be work with a lot of vehicles that they don't have to have an option, able to charge. So I think that's the concern, and they've been experiencing some of that currently. So that's looking forward. That's something we need to make it easier for people to adapt it to.
Yeah, and this is, I appreciate that, man. And it's kind of the opposite. You've heard folks, say, how do we avoid the barriers? But also the flip side of that coin, to your point, is how do you make it easier for folks to adopt into, strategies that are going to both benefit them and benefit greenhouse gas reduction. Thank you for that. Okay, Lana, who are Jude, Alana, Angela. Like, I know you put something in the chat, but I don't know if you want to add any more.
Actually, I'm eating dinner, but yeah, I would love to jump in and
Yeah.
add something. We're at IKEA eating dinner, so this is even funnier. So a lot of community elders and big families were wondering about the EV cost of the big vehicles, because they're laughing at the idea of getting a bike, an electric bike or scooter, because you're not gonna, like, I'm a mother of 6. I'm not gonna put 6 kids on a bike. No way. Or when we have to take our elders to the doctor, they still want their vehicle. And so the costs were still like what was said earlier about some of the issues being over people's heads. So we focused on like, hey, what about getting an EV car, because then you're not putting out carbon transmissions or emissions, sorry. So they were like, yeah, okay, that sounds great. Tell me more about this. And we actually had one community member go and purchase a car, but the knowledge that she had to have in arguing with car dealerships. So it was like, can we have some kind of a transparency bill so we know exactly what the car is going to cost us? And we were talking about the federal rebates and the Washington state credit, and some of the dealerships wouldn't honor, take the money from the federal rebate off. So they, the cost was just prohibitive. And so they worry about that. And then a lot of them we're talking about building new electric homes, all electric, and then electric cars. And they said, so what is that going to do to our cost for electricity? Because a lot of the elders were saying that electric rates keep going up, so how are we going to mitigate that possible harm to them and the larger families that are in older apartments, older homes that haven't been updated and they're all electric, or some that have gas for heating and they're fearful of electric costs for heating. So how do we deal with that? And then transportation was like, why can't we copy what Pierce County did, where they have a little Roadrunner vehicle that takes people to areas that are not serviced by buses, and also to increase buses and light rail, if that's possible.
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, a few things there. So another potential policy when you think about kind of public transportation, ensuring there's other models, right, beyond just kind of what we typically think of. And then just, several examples around cost concerns and the knowledge even to navigate some of these even incentive or rebate programs. Did you want to add something else like it?
Yeah, it's also Lika. But
Lika, sorry.
yeah, so the income level for the car credit, that needs to be lifted, because people are missing it, families are missing it, but like $5, and that's just crazy. Like, even among my staff that are part-time, they were talking about how they barely miss it. So and my staff would be the most amazing advocates if they could get into this, but they can't because $5 or $10.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for correcting me from saying your name wrong over and over again.
And
So,
then there was also the 2066 pro people. There was a debate that they had. So we're talking about building green, but how many companies in Washington actually build green? Because during the debate that we were watching, it looked like one guy in King County goes all over the state trying to build green while the others are focused on doing things the way they do. So how do we incentivize companies to build green?
yeah, thank you for that. So again, it's incentives, cost concerns, eligibility, right? There's a lot of stuff in there that you brought, Lika. Thank you. Let's go, Angela, and then Josh, looks like you have your hand up again. Angela?
Hi, everyone. So basically everything has already been said. So like Danya has already said that our community has been kind of looking at like the severe weather aspect of everything. But there is like a few of the other things that they've looked at is like transportation, but they don't feel safe. How are we going to have them like get on public transportation or like get them walking if they just don't feel safe to do so? The other thing that was on here that I saw was like the agriculture. Our community is very into like farming and building like their own things. So this would be amazing to even have like classes or to have the educational side of that. And of course, with the waste and consumption as well. But the only thing that I fear with our community is that like where would we be able to connect them with it, as well as that language barrier? Because a lot of the time, like they're interested, but there's nobody that they see that like fits their description or even tries to outreach to them with their language. So that was like those were the things that we saw.
No, thanks for naming that. And again, connecting to some of the how, right? You talk about education, outreach, but how that's done and where you build trust and all the things that kind of raises concerns. Let's go, Josh, and then I'd love to bring in, I think, Jude and Alana. We haven't heard from the two of you. And then Yolanda, I see you joined, so I want to say hello too. Josh, jump in.
I just want to follow up on Lika's comments. I mean, they were so spot on. I went and purchased a Kia, an EV9 recently, and didn't qualify for the state rebate, which is a wonderful problem to have. But it's wild to me. I mean, this is the income limits for that state rebate are obscenely low. I mean, if you're making that much money, you have no business buying a new car at all. It's just horrid. And again, that's creating barriers instead of solutions. And of course, climate change and emissions don't care what your income is. It's why I say we probably should focus more on the commercial side than the consumer or residential side. But I digress. I also wanted to support the comments that Lika made around microtransit. I mean, C-Tran has the current, but it's only if you live in Camas and Washougal. why do we not have this in downtown Vancouver? This is absolutely beyond me. Rift tried doing electric, golf carts essentially for, I think, folks who work in downtown. I was never super clear on what that intent was, but I don't believe they're up and running right now, or at least I haven't seen them in quite some time. But again, the ability to leverage these smaller, more dense communities and leverage microtransit, electrified microtransit would be huge. And light rail, I'm so excited that we've got funding finally for this dang bridge, and that it sure sounds like light rail is actually coming over into Vancouver. But I was on a meeting, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago now, talking about the light rail station that was going in right by Evergreen here in Vancouver, and how they're putting in applications for this lid that's going to bridge Fort Vancouver National Historic Site with downtown Vancouver. And on this list of priorities they had identified, they had sorted them into 3 categories: what they wanted to pursue and what was, iffy, and what they didn't want to pursue. And one of the things they weren't looking at was things like, electric bike and scooter charging stations and all of that. And it's just wild to me that we can be having such seemingly opposite conversations within the same community. Obviously, they're on a city scale, we're at the county, but it was so disheartening to see that. And so I just wanted to support everything Lika said. She did great, and I've had a lot of those same feelings and opinions throughout this work myself. So kudos.
Thank you, Josh. Jude, jump in.
So I have an overarching comment.
Please.
And I appreciate listening to folks. The placeholder for an overarching goal and a place that specifies for communities, I think would be like, why not be redundant especially in Clark County, where the emphasis is where the emphasis, because it's supposed to be without, throughout everything, environmental justice. So let's make sure it is on people's minds when they read these goals and policies, that it's not just an overarching one that says, yes, it's everywhere, but that it actually is everywhere. That's a general comment. And I think we have incentives in here for the county and certain commercial, but we have a lot of institutions as well, and they're public and private hospitals. I mean, like, why not, universities, schools, why not be a model for green infrastructure in all of these sectors? I don't know where that goes, but maybe everywhere. I also wanted to call out, you have green building workforce under green building and sustainable building practices, but why not have a green workforce? So in the agricultural community, labor is a huge issue. It intersects with documentation, with mobility, with housing, with transportation. People want to grow food on all kinds of levels, commercial and personal, and that is not really integrated into what we're talking about, particularly in land use. We also have this land conversion problem. So I know that agriculture is covered in other places, and in one place it's being covered in a completely outside the growth management plan process, the county proposing to set up an agricultural commission. So I don't know how that's going to get integrated in here, but it really, there's a lot of ag policies that should be called out specifically. And I'll save that laundry list for another time. But I just wanted to call out too that an equity environmental justice commission would ensure, a funded one, that these policies are carried out in the overarching plan future, and not be just some sideline thing we might do, or maybe we'll engage with these communities. Like, no, make this thing a thing.
Yeah, and I appreciate all that, Jude. And so I think the both and of having an overarching kind of policy goal that pushes for environmental justice, as well as, I think the opportunity to then build it into all of these policies as explicitly as possible at the outset. So I hear you on that, expanding kind of the green workforce language, right? Not to be so specific to just green building, but beyond that. And then I appreciate your call out of some of the other kind of, I don't know if it's industrial scale sized institutional spaces that would also really benefit from those kind of energy investments and shifts. So let's go Yolanda and then Alana. I think the two of you might be the two last that we haven't heard.
Hi, Ben and everyone. And yes, I did join a little late today, but I'm so glad to be here and incredibly excited about hearing about the dialogue that Jude just provided for us. When I think about this overarching band or committee or council that oversees all policies and P&Ps, policies and procedures when it pertains to equity, justice, starting at the roots of our agricultural industry. What bubbles up to the top of my brain, what first bubbles up to the top for me is looking at our rural communities. And the reason why I'm saying all of that is because that is where infrastructure has not yet been successful. So you can start small and grow that. And they could be a model. I just had some colleagues go, I want to say it's called Colville, Washington. It's a very remote, they told me, somewhat isolated place. And even in certain parts where they thought that they would get, Wi-Fi, and they had the best of phone service, unlike me. I have Cricket. They still could not receive calls or get their emails. And so I was talking to them about it's up to their state to put money into their entire infrastructure. And it goes back to the old adage or the old saying of build it and they will come, because they were complaining about not having enough clinicians in their medical centers and one or two main hospitals. So just wanted to add that bit, starting in a rural, and people in our rural communities are also marginalized and unfortunately underserved. So we can start there, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And it ties us back to the conversation earlier around kind of the geographic differences around the county and the need to pay attention to those geographic distinctions. I think I must have scared Alana away when I told her she was in the queue. I don't see her anymore. So did we get everybody? I think we did. Did I miss anybody? Awesome. Well, thank you for moving through that conversation and just offering so much insight based on kind of your collective expertise, and it tees us up for some of the conversations we'll have going forward. So before we move into closing, I'm going to move us into our public comment section of the agenda. It does look like we only have one attendee, so I guess Clara, I'll be looking to you if you'd like to offer public comment, but we create this space at every one of our agendas for the public to offer input. We also, of course, the process includes public input, written public comments. So you can see the comment in the chat to email comments to comp.plan@clark.wa.gov or online to the link that's provided. So I guess, Clara, if you're interested in providing public comment, you can raise your hand. And if you're not interested, then we will do a last call for public comment. Seeing none, we will move to closing. So if you want to go to the next slide, who's talking next steps? We go to the next slide. Is that Tracy, Jenna? You want to talk about kind of where do we go from this conversation? Is that supposed to be me?
This is Jenna. I can jump in.
Thanks.
Okay, so as Tracy, this should all be repetitive for things we've already said, I think, during the meeting, but as Tracy noted, we were all taking notes during that conversation on the greenhouse gas, your reactions to the draft greenhouse gas list. So we will review and try to figure out how to integrate your suggestions into the list. We're gonna do the same with the feedback we received the other day from the CAG group. So we'll come up with our next draft list of that greenhouse gas list of goals and policies. Then the technical consultants will be analyzing that version of the draft list to give us at least some a high level, first level analysis. So some additional information to help us consider them even further. And then our next meeting is in November, and we are going to put greenhouse gas reduction to the side for a moment, and we're going to switch back to the resilience policy list and look at those policies through the equity lens that you all helped us develop. So that'll be the November meeting. And then the December meeting, we will revisit this updated greenhouse gas policy list with the equity lens. So that'll take us to the end of the year. And in the meantime, when we're not in meetings, some of you are done your engagement work, so congratulations. For those of you who are still doing engagement, if you still have phase 2 and phase 3 engagement underway, we would love to see your data as soon as you have it. So as soon as you finish your engagement events, please send the feedback you collected, your progress reports, and all the documentation you have to Lauren, Amy, and me, so that we can take a look and start compiling it. And then for those of you who have phase 4 engagement activities, we ask that you work to complete those by our December meeting. All right, that's what I've got there, Ben.
Great. Any questions for next steps?
Sorry, I'm sorry, I typed in Spanish. When is the meeting in November? Like
the next meeting, actually, Ben, do you have that on the next slide?
Yeah, if you go to the next slide, yeah, we can talk about the dates. So it'll be November, Monday, November, a new date, November, October 4th.
November, October 4th? That's
yeah, November 4th. So that's obviously a holdover from, I don't know, we never met October 4th, so who knows what that is. But Monday, November 4th, we'll all be excited about the national situation that will be happening the day after, but we'll be meeting then. Jenna just outlined kind of how we'll use that time. We'll keep updating the information to the webpage, and any contacts, questions, reach out to Jenna. So with that, 6:19, I think there's one more slide that says thank you. Yes, thank you all. So appreciate, right? There's the webpage again, Jenna's contact information. Again, I as I said at the beginning, I had a 3-hour rulemaking this morning facilitation, and that drained me. And I'm leaving today feeling uplifted by the energy you all bring into this space every single time. So appreciate the incredible work that you do and all the sharing, right? Y'all, I really liked being able to hear from everyone in the space today, and just appreciate you all so much and the work that you do every day. So with that, send you on your way. Much love. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you in November.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.